name is Katie Hirsch, and I'm a curator at the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art. Thank you for joining us for the second of several In Conversation events that we'll host over the rest of the year for our new virtual exhibition, Displacements, Revisitations of Home. Displacements opened on Friday, August 28th, and may be experienced at displacements.org. Displacements, Revisitations of Home features the work of 10 artists who were asked to submit work that spoke most closely to their own reflections of the meaning of home. Each artist was paired with a writer who responded to the body of work with an essay. Recordings of all conversation events, including this one, will be available at displacements.org after the fact. We also invite you to participate in the project by visiting the Engage tab on the website. There, you'll find a phone number you can call to leave a message sharing your own stories of home, as well as a map where you can add your home alongside those of others. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Displacements artist Jiha and her respondent Lilly Wei. Jiha is an artist who works across many media, including painting, ceramic sculpture, mixed media, and installation. With this work, she explores fluid identities and the global movement of people and their cultures. Jiha joins us today from Atlanta, where she lives and works. Lilly Wei is an independent curator, writer, journalist, and critic whose area of interest is global contemporary art, in particular emerging art and artists. Her work has appeared in dozens of publications worldwide, and she's a longtime contributor to Art in America, to name only one such appointment. Lilly joins us this evening from New York City. We invite you to ask any questions you have for Jiha or Lilly by entering them in the comments for this video, and we'll address them at the end. Thank you so much, Jiha and Lilly, for joining us. We're really excited to talk about your work together in the Displacements Project.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with Lilly Wei.
And thank you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. I thought we might start with, well, Jiha and I had actually talked about this a little bit, but when I had written the essay as the respondent for Jiha's work in this show, the editors asked me, I had said something about Jiha being a Korean artist, and the editor asked me, oh, is she Korean or is she Korean American? And I said, actually, I don't know how Jiha identifies. So I thought I would ask her, and she said Korean American. So I thought we might begin maybe there, thinking about, well, identity, home, displacement. But I also think that these kinds of identity can be rather complicated, or at least, there are several levels to them. So, for example, Jiha, is she Asian? Is she East Asian? Is she Asian American? And then we can add, is she, East Asian American, but is she Korean? Is she Korean American? Is she South Korean? Is she Korean American? Is she a Southerner? Is she Georgian? Is she, what do you call a resident from Atlanta? Atlantean?
Atlanta, yeah.
And then, is she an artist, a wife, a mother, a daughter, and so etc. So anyway, just to kind of break it down, because I also think that maybe not as often these days, but this idea of Asian American as a monolithic unity, we know just doesn't exist because there are too many countries involved and there are too many different cultures. So anyway, with that in mind, I just thought I would also ask her, when this project, when she was asked to be on this project, what did the theme mean to you? What did home and displacement mean to you when you were, when you were invited to do this?
Yes, I think that conversation, you started out asking me, how do you want to identify yourself, Korean or Korean American? That was a really good question, and it kind of put me in a spot to think about, where my home base is now. I used to introduce myself Korean because basically based on my passport, and I still use Korean passport. And I did grow up in Korea for a long time. And I came to the States when I was 26. So I was already grown up, young adult. And then I lived here about 20 years, longer than 20 years now. So the weight of my life become heavier for American side. So I do feel like it's sort of good obligation to start out saying I'm Korean American rather than just introduce myself as Korean. But I always feel like, as a human being, like, before we distinguish and identify all kinds of different like labels, and like I'm a human species, and that comes in my mind first always. I guess like people from global, like, I never ever feel any closer these days, especially over pandemic. I feel so close to people who are all over the places. So I guess for me, the home is where I physically live right now, but me as a person and an artist, all those experience and accumulation of my experience and is part of me that has everything, all experience from a different time and different places. So I now, after Lily, you asked me about like, you want to be called Korean or Korean American, I feel that I want to be included. I do live in this country. I pay taxes here. I am Korean American. And my work, you look at it, it's not just all about Korea. I'm talking about my current status as a visual art. It is really a lot about being American experience as well.
Well, just to go back a little bit, why did you come here? I mean, I know it was to study, but what did you think the advantages of coming to the U.S. to finish studying? And were you planning to go back, or were you planning on staying?
I wanted to go back to Korea. Well, a model after a lot of successful artists and teachers. And in Korea, teachers are the job who get the most respect, and culturally, we have this funny idiom that you don't even step on your teacher's shadow. We respect that much. And we also consider teachers like almost equal level as parents. And I think that is really part of a big Confucianism from China, and it's deeply rooted in Korean culture. And my mom was also a high school teacher. So being a teacher is the highest expectation, and also they are very proud. So I wanted to get highest degree in fine art, go back to Korea, and then teach. That was my original plan, but plan has changed, and I decided to live in this country, and I have a wonderful family here who are American. Not Korean American, they're American, I guess. They were born in this country, right? But yeah, that's the reason. I came to Korea because it was tendency, people have a 2 degree from both Korea and America or elsewhere, other country. But for me, I guess like I had some kind of fantasy about American contemporary art. There was so much freedom in it, and then you can make stuff happen. And I rather wanted to explore than following European tradition. So American contemporary art, I've been looking a lot when I was in Korea, and then I really was fascinated by that philosophy and what's happening, and it seems so current. And that's why I choose to come study in America rather than going to France or like Italy.
And so then, so you studied here, and what was the difference? I mean, how did that affect your work? Because you had an MFA from Korea, right? And you were getting a second one here.
Yes.
So how did that affect your work?
It actually affects very largely, and my current work is very the way I train myself and then learn from my peer group and just learn all over. Like while I was in MFA program in University of Iowa, also being in a part of artists in the community, like being in Washington DC for a long time, and then now we live in Atlanta, Georgia, but we've been here over like 10 years. So I've learned a lot stuff just being an artist. But in Korea, like it's funny, in art department, we have like, this is gonna shock you. We have the Oriental painting department, which is like so wrong terminology, meaning Korean traditional painting department. And also we have Western style painting department. So those terminology, I can't go back because it's a long story, but they have this traditional art painting department and Western department. So I did have a degree from Western painting department in MFA.
But you took Korean courses also?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Undergrad degree was art education, so I was able to just take a lot of different classes as well. But now this is like really mixed up because I use acrylic, black, paint, and like not sumi ink. But for however Asian people, Korean people specifically look at my work, especially they understand the notion of like using Korean traditional mulberry paper, they immediately associate with Korean traditional watercolor ink, which I understand, but they have their prejudice about Korean traditional art as well. So I got really funny, interesting criticism by critics or like curators, like your black's really not deep, it's kind of dead. It was kind of funny because I did not use traditional Korean watercolor, so I had to tell them, well, this is acrylic paint, this isn't like Korean traditional ink. So there's really the mixture of like a different material based on concept that I'm utilizing at the moment, but that prejudice or sort of a quick reading happening not just in America but in Korea as well. If I think of me as an artist myself, like going both culture back and forth, so it is really kind of interesting for me to explore that what's tradition and what's new, and how people are really confused and what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah, but I would think it was almost a deliberate. I mean, it's deliberate on your part to use I don't know, in a kind of a critical way of, to use Korean paper. I mean, a lot of artists who come out of an Asian tradition, even if they don't study there, or even if they've completely, studied in the US, but they are American, they also just, they like paper. And of course, the minor arts, as we know in other cultures, especially in Asian, are not called the minor arts. I mean, they are revered traditionally. So I mean, the fact that you use ink, you also use acrylic, but you do use ink, you use hanji paper, you do ceramics, and ceramics has long been a medium of, great veneration I would think that certain ceramics are as valuable as perhaps, Rembrandt is to some collectors. So just
right.
So I thought you would be doing that really deliberately. And I was just kind of trying to understand when the mix occurred, because of course you also have, American styles and imagery in your work. So did that was something you mixed before, or when you came, did you make these hybrids before you came here, or did it take off?
Oh, my work is completely different. When I was in Korea, I was figurative painter. So, and I was figurative painter, and then I would use oil on canvases, and I did that a lot. And then when I was in University of Iowa, I guess the whole 3 year was very transitional for me, and I had to fight against what I really used to and feel comfortable with. So for me, painting like portraiture from the photograph of my old family members or like Korean people, it really, how can I say, it was not easy for me because I felt really sad and I felt like I need to go back. And there's a whole baggage of like, you know, nostalgia plus like sadness and like, you know, all that. And I also felt like I was really belonging to the past rather than present. So I had to shift my, I guess, material and also subject. It was really critical and very difficult. So one semester I decided myself like, what if this semester I stop painting portrait and then start painting landscape and see if I can pull that emotion using the landscape instead of people's faces. And that was very sort of like a great opportunity for me to do that one semester. But I was still very attached to oil on canvas, and I really couldn't abandon the notion of like, you know, I guess like, I don't want to say master artist. We had this discussion in Facebook earlier because master kind of like related to masculinity and very sort of like colonialism, and people talk about that. But I was just really, how can I blend in? How can I introduce my work in that European tradition? So I couldn't really abandon oil on canvas for a long time. I was just keep on doing it. And then after September 11 happened and I graduated and I didn't have a studio that has a window. So I was kind of trapped myself in a way that I can't really produce work that I used to do. And that was actually a good thing that happened to me because I shifted my material entirely like water-based media. And then my attitude towards material become very different. So who says a water-based media or like a drawing is always just for practice and lightly should be treated, and who make all these rules? So I really have to think about myself again, like, you know, how to treat material. So I kind of self-taught all over again how to use water-based media with like really full-hearted. And then that's where my work on paper started. And I was exploring lots of different materials, like not just Western watercolor paper, but like kanji paper, and then exploring with acrylic. So all that had happened when actually I was not capable of making the work that I feel comfortable with. So all the work you see is like after I got out of school, and then I had a period of like confusing time life-wise, but then it sort of wonderfully, you know, how can I say, let me grow as a more serious artist in a way. So all that stuff's like, I've never done all of that stuff when I was in Korea. I was making more European style oil on canvas. So it's kind of funny.
Well, I think, yeah, but I think in a way we all kind of given ourselves permission not to have to follow that model anymore, right? And you can experiment. But the thing is, of course, you were schooled in you were trained in working with paper. So if you were somebody else who didn't have a studio, and if you were maybe just trained here, would you have naturally gone to paper? I mean, would you have, I don't know, done something else, you know?
Oh yeah,
Found
that's
another
a good
solution.
point. That's absolutely good point, because I was trained as a traditional painter as well, and I took like, you know, Korean traditional painting and how to size paper with rabbit skin glue and all that stuff, like, you know, pigment with like mixing with like natural glue to use it for Korean traditional painting. So it become my sort of like nutrition, I guess, in a way. And then I was like, what if I replace this rabbit skin glue to acrylic medium? We'll do the very similar thing. It might be a little bit, it might be different, but like, you know, this is what I want to explore. And then it did work. And then I started sizing paper on canvases, sort of in a way to disguise the surface level, because like, you know, people are so familiar with looking at oil on canvas, hanging on the wall gloriously in white space, right? But the paper is always like either framed or on the scroll, kind of Asian traditional format. So for me, it's like sort of like putting a makeup, like different makeup on a canvas. So for that reason, a part of series of my work, I do explore with the thin Korean mulberry paper cover up with on the canvas. So here, everyone's met here, and then familiar faces. I guess this one. So
Yeah,
they
let's look at it. Pick a work and let's look at maybe which one do you want to talk about? Familiar face or yellow wave or
everyone's
pick one.
met here is the second image. Next image. Yeah, this one is actually on canvas surface, but has a paper on sealed paper cover up, and then I use acrylic. And then the second, the following image of familiar faces is the same way. So when you see it, you still kind of like feel very mysterious about the surface. Like, oh, how did you get that? She get all those detail with the like thin hairbrush, and it's like the soaking sort of like, you know, technique with acrylic and ink. You can, I mean, if you could do it on a canvas, but it has a very different feeling to it. So that paper can provide the different surfaces. And I could still paint very thick and impasto style on the bottom with acrylic, sort of like mimicking, you know, oil on canvas as well. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I talk to some graduate student and people, they still have the prejudice about acrylic. You know, acrylic, you can't really make that deep, like a beautiful color that oil paint can make. I mean, maybe in some degree, it depends on what kind of technique you're using. But for me, acrylic is very versatile, flexible, and adaptable. So for me, acrylic as a material is so much like America. And I still use mulberry paper. So it's like a marriage between something old, like Korean traditional paper making, that I still use that material, and then bond it with acrylic, which is American, you know, invention, which I think is great invention.
But you throw in ink also, don't you? You put in ink also.
Yeah, yeah. Well, ink, there's all types of different ink.
Yeah.
Things that hybrid constantly, all these like, you know, companies making hybrid things, which I'm really excited about. So some colors, like, you know, they work like a watercolor, but they're acrylic and they're very fluid. But after it dries, they become kind of permanent. And some heavy acrylic, heavy body acrylic is very thick and sort of mimicking the impasto style of oil. And although it gets shrinking, but oil paint also shrinks too in time. Oil paint for me is like, it dries forever until like dries hundreds of years. And at the end of the day, like they crack. So there's somebody from the museum has to hire someone to like fix all those traditional, I mean, the European masters paintings. But acrylic is like ever plastic. I mean, we have a huge problem with the plastic now, but it is flexible and that doesn't really crack. So it's, for me, it's like, I guess, crazy contemporary zombie.
Well, is this what you mean when you say that your practice, when you change your mediums and your techniques, that you said it was a kind of displacement? So is this what you mean by that? What you just said? You know, this kind of hybridization?
Yes, I think the hybridization and in people's invention keep on improving towards, I guess, like uncertainty, but also better experimentation, I guess. So for that, acrylic is really versatile for me to use.
I just didn't mean acrylic, but I meant all of the, you know, all the range that you choose. You know, I thought that would be a kind of mixing and maybe a kind of just, you know, a changing of place, a changing of just utilizing different forms and you know, feeling comfortable or introducing it all, you know.
Oh yeah, that's a different genre hybrid, right? Well, for me, it's interesting because like oil on canvas is like market-wise, it's the most expensive, very male dominant, and it's always occupying beautiful white gallery space, right? But then when the same imagery goes on the ceramic surfaces, and people start calling it decoration, like, oh, you're a decorative potter. And you're like that, that labeling is really interesting for me. And for me, that I like am a people watcher, and I observe like their behavior and the way people are. I always learn from people so much and then adapt that to my work. So like, why is it? Who makes that decision? All of a sudden, the same images become very cheap one, or kind of like sort of ignored by the audience that it's decorative. So
well, I don't know. I don't know if that is as. I mean, I don't think that is as stringent as it used to be. I think, I think people are very much loosening up in terms of, or being much more experimental, or far ranging in what they can do, and it's all kind of accepted. I mean, most people also work in, several, in any materials they want.
Yeah, I agree.
On what they're making.
Very popular last 15 years or so, that ceramic become more acceptable as a fine art, and it become a huge, like almost like hit, like lots of people doing fine art is like doing ceramic.
Yeah, for sure. I think.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That
Yeah, could we talk a little bit about your? I mean, you use a lot of Asian, or East Asian, or I don't know how you sometimes one separates Korean, Japanese, and Chinese, but imagery, but you also use others, such as, I don't know, I guess Kachina dolls, you have Native American. So what attracts you to the objects from these various cultures? I mean, is there a consistent theme that attracts you, and that's why you use it?
Yes, I guess, it's always, I've been always interested in how people look at others. Like when you become your own person, but when you shift to your perspective, looking at others, like you can be others as well. So for that, I've been always thinking about how people also, who gives the permission to use what? So because I'm Korean, I'm okay to use Korean imagery. Because I'm Korean, I cannot use Japanese or Chinese or African American like stuff. So people also reference it as like appropriating things a lot. But for me, it's like almost like a social experimentation for me. So I borrow images and change things up, but sometimes I use it the way they are because I want them to be recognized. And then it's sort of shifting the contents. The Disney, especially Disney characters that
can we look at one image, and you can just read the parts
yes,
it out?
I
Maybe
guess
one of the
Genie
paintings
is a good image. The recent print that I did with Flying Horse Edition, this one right here.
Yeah, okay. So just tell us what we're looking at. What do you think we're looking at?
It's called a Genie. Yeah, this one. So it's like for me, this is very theatrical. Every part of like brushstroke or object or iconography has their own role to play. And I was really thinking about Genie, like, Disney, movie Genie, the animation, like, makes your dream come true. So the dragon is sort of like coming out of the Korean base. And this is actually reference from Korean base from 19th century Joseon period. But then there's Andy Warhol banana, almost like a very, like for me, it's like a desire. And then banana also, we talked about this a little bit, also represent Asian American, especially they were born in America who often don't speak Korean. So they're American. So there are people kind of like I'm not 100% sure it's a derogatory way to call Asian like banana, but I kind of find the humor in it. So it's like
They're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. In case anyone doesn't know that, but just, you know.
Yes, so it's here. It's kind of playing like a multiple roles. Like here, it's like making a little part of still life, referencing like 60s pop, art like from Andy Warhol and Velvet Underground album cover was it, and then I like take it out and put it in a decontextualize, and then it's become something else, and then pair up with fortune cookie that I made my own, and then here it become props again, like a still life. So it's a still life. And then also the brush strokes, like you sort of recognize as like a Wittgenstein's like a best like movement of brush stroke. And oftentimes he used yellow, and then I immediately think about like Western beauty of blonde and blue eye. So that was my take on. But in Korea, we call blonde hair yellow hair, which is kind of funny. It's yellow and blonde, right? It's however you, kind of call it. Blonde is like really fancy, sort of like Western beauty. But when you call it yellow hair, it has a different take on. So I'm kind of using color that way, like symbolic also a way that people have a different, feeling to it. But here I also sort of switched that color to tie-dye. Because for me, I've been really thinking about tie-dye for a long time, and I've been using it in my work for a long time. And tie-dye, I've learned that hippie culture, and my husband used to tell me not to put tie-dye shirts on my sons when he was like little. And then after I learned about what tie-dye is, I actually become like it more. And I love that like a hippie culture, and then all about peace and all this side effect like drug and everything. It's so much, so much more that I wanted. So I kind of use that color shifting, but we do have this color format in Korea in the stripe forms. The pattern itself is very symbolic and iconic. It's called rainbow stripes. We call it sekdong, and people use that dress for parents' birthday, wedding. So it's a lot about celebrate life and longevity and every good things. So I'm trying to find different, overlapping symbolic references or cultural references sort of happening at the same time on my work. So this, for me, this print is a lot, just as much about Korean, like, traditional reference.
Well, as you said, it's a statement I like, which you said something about, it looks Asian, but it's really all about America, right? And then these are these other images, those sculptures, those objects. I guess they come in several scales, but so the fortune cookie, the Chinese takeout container, you know, I mean, so they're very recognized. I mean, they're Chinese. You're appropriating. But actually they're not Chinese, right? I mean, this is
it's American. Box.
I mean, the history of it, of course, is that they were both of them were invented in the United States. I mean, the fortune cookie might have had some basis in Japanese cookies, but as we know it, it was invented in San Francisco, most likely. And then I just, I love this takeout container because that has become sort of the almost the object, that signifies Chinese food,
Right, yeah.
And apparently it was first made like as a paper pail in I think 1894 as a patent, but then someone in the 70s, a designer in the 70s decided to put a pagoda on it, and then these kind of fake Chinese like lettering, and then it became this takeout container that is used not only here but everywhere in the world except China. They don't do takeout.
Yes, exactly. That's really funny. It's very American. right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So both of
So
them.
I think that when we talk about America, do we really need to only think about it's white Caucasian? I don't think so. So like it's like it's that this is face of America too, and we have to embrace that. And if you only like to eat Chinese food, but you don't really include Asian people in this country as American, like you are missing out.
Well, so let's see. You also shall we look at Kimchi,
Ceramic work, yeah.
the other, right? Or
Yeah,
actually,
this
we can
one.
maybe just So tell us a bit about this work.
Oh, yeah, so I have a series of ceramic dolls that are actually stack of like thrown ceramic together. So the size, they're not humongous. They're like a teapot, a little bit, maybe this one's a little bit bigger, but it's like tabletop. You can put it on as an object. It's sort of resemble your utensil that you collect. And I really want people to engage with that object in that sense, where you have a teapot, you have teacups, and you just become very familiar and friendly with the objects. And I want that attitude from the viewer when they deal with my sculpture. So I'm okay with that scale. I don't think that I want to make a humongous scale, but somehow they can sort of relate it to their body as an object. And I want them to look like some sort of dolls or a character, more personal, I guess, like a characteristic style. So this one, I was thinking about Korean drag queen who's super famous. His name is Kimchi, and he's like a crazy, awesome makeup artist, and he's just amazing. So I'm following him on Instagram, and I always look at his makeup and the way he dress up, and it really is fascinating. And I sort of wanted to include that style in my sculptural work. So my sculptural work, some have more functional sort of like deceiving quality. Here you can see both ends look like a teapot, but they're not really functional. Sometimes they have lots of holes and the cup is splitted on the top. So I'm kind of making a gesture of, hey, I'm using this functional stuff, but they're not really functional, they're sculpture. So I kind of like to tease and a little bit like the audience in a way that, like, in also ceramic world, what's functional, what's sculptural, what's decorative, and what's not. And then also surface decoration, I heavily paint and draw, but using underglaze and also glaze. In this case, I also carved a lot. And then for ceramic, I only have this picture here, but on the back side, they have a mask. I'm sorry, I don't have the picture for the back side. I don't think I gave you, Katie. But so you can kind of look all around. So particularly my ceramic work, I kind of make it one side more like happy, and then on the other side, they're more like monsterish. So it kind of carries like a different feelings, a different emotion. And like I said, also talks a lot about like what's painting and drawing, the quality of painting and drawing, how is it differently treated when it's on the paper or canvas or a surface here.
Well, you seem to like, experimenting with different surfaces. I mean, and you seem to have you take a real pleasure in, in the painting process and making the images. And
yeah.
And is it dictated? I mean, how does it change with the ceramics? I mean, it must be more difficult, obviously.
I guess it's very different. I just I feel a little bit relaxed about it when I draw and paint on ceramic surfaces, because in my mind, I still feel like, I mean, painting too, but more so. I feel heavily responsible to make a good painting, I guess, because I've been painter for a long time. But for ceramic work, I think that I don't feel as much responsible or feel heavy to it. So I doodle a lot, and I also kind of go for it. And then I know that every stage in ceramic process could be ruined and broken, easily make mistakes. So I try not to expect too much, sort of like engaging at the moment and, and then also, I guess there's a lot of forms and details in ceramic in 3D. There's so much painting and drawing you could do. So you have to plan. Sometimes you want to use all types of colors and different mark makings. Sometimes you have to go monochromatic. So that kind of decision making is based on the form of ceramic, I guess. So it gives me a little bit of freedom to paint and draw on ceramics.
It's interesting because I think it would be more difficult and maybe be more careful, but you're not. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I always say that my painting's like my husband. Like I know him for a super long time, but I feel like I have to do really well. But ceramic is like, I used to say that ceramic is like my boyfriend, but it's more, no, I'm not gonna say that. It's like more like my son. So it's more like,
is your husband listening now?
I think he doesn't mind.
And you also use humor in your work. I mean, some of your comments I think could be a little is kind of scathing in a way, but you don't do it with outrage. But it's there. But some of it's also just funny, and has more significance. Like the mop you use for a kind of a mask. Can we look at that one? It's which one is? What's
you
the
mean Kimchi?
The mask, the mop mask. That one. Yes.
This one?
Yes.
What is it called? I forgot the title.
It's here somewhere. I'll find it.
It's probably on the bottom somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's Juhuang. I don't know what that means. What does Juhuang
It's just color. This mop color is orangish red. So Juhuang means like a scarlet, like red scarlet color.
Yeah.
But mask work, I sort of look at lots of different masks from different countries. But this one, I was not really looking at much. I was just sort of like going with the clay. But I guess in my mind, I was thinking about the lion or some sort of like the creature that can be wearing in the Korean traditional like performance. We call it talchum. And their talchum is like a Korean folk performance. And they have all the roles, like mostly they're very focused on making fun of politicians and corrupt people. Right, it's a very timely like manner, but it's people really love it, and then that tradition is constantly coming down, and people go watch it. And I find that other cultures have that very similar performance as well, and oftentimes it's a mockery of like politicians or like rich people, or have a massive satire in it. So I'm looking at those props a lot, and then I wanted to make objects that are unwearable, also still like exploring with that idea with the ceramic, but also using a different mixed media, different material that sort of has a function, and then people can kind of guess to it. When I'm making painting, the colors and mark making have that role, but when I also make object works, and then objecthood has that role. So here, Lilly, you recognize the mop already. So I thought that was kind of powerful. And also braided hair, that's synthetic hair, but it's also followed by the Korean traditional knot making. So
and that's below. It's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but instead of using silk rope, I use extension hair, and then braid it super long, and then follow that, hand knotted the knot making style. So some people kind of recognize, but knot is really interesting because it's a form of language as well in certain culture.
Well, and also in certain disciplines. I mean, it's a language. So how much does beauty play a role in this? I mean, are you consciously trying to make something It's a beautiful object too. I mean, I think they're beautiful, but you know.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
people,
like you.
people say that, like, being beautiful is not a compliment, like in contemporary artwork. I don't know. But for me, someone says, oh, your artwork is beautiful is a huge compliment. I'm after that. Like I try to make objects that are interesting and beautiful. So that's something I definitely go after. And the aesthetic and the quality of like, your skill set plays very important role in my work. And I sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say worship, but it's really important for me, the craftsmanship part. But I do not prioritize that has to be the first. The image itself has to be touching, somehow related to you, and play with the viewers to get the emotion out of them. But I think that skill set has to play that role, although it's not come across first thing. Sometimes I go back and cancel out things if it looks too predictable. Like so some of the objects go to like kiln several times, and also painting, I put lots of detail, and then at the end of the day, I look at it again, it looks too much, trying very hard, and then I go back and cancel out that act. So I still really think about, I mean, that's studio practice. I think that a lot of artists think about that as well, but that is really good question. That's how I work, trying to make beautiful objects.
Well, that's also kind of the schooling, at least. I mean, now it's changing again, shifting into, I think people are much more concerned. I mean, artists are more concerned with the craft, but at one point, craft was a dirty word, I mean, no one wanted.
Right.
And now, of course, I think people
Craft is hot right now. Yeah.
They're more interested, younger artists are more interested in So, and I just wanted to ask you, so do you think masks have a metaphoric meaning for you? Like, just, different disguises, besides whatever the shamanistic ritual, historical associations. I mean, you do a lot. I mean, it's one of your standard objects, right? That format.
Yeah.
So
I think that's absolutely amazing question because remember that circling back to our conversation again, I was having a very hard time painting portraiture because I think of past and memories and like belonging and sense of belonging and my family member too much. I couldn't really engage with painting itself. So I had to abandon and come out. And then I think this is my desire to make portrait again, but not specifically using somebody's face, but more like the mixture of it. But if you look at the faces, they're landscape. So you can see the skyline, you can see the ground, you can see the like brush stroke almost look like a wave or a wind or like, so it's for me, it's a playground that I can sort of pull everything together, trying to evoke and emotion and trying to show like the different space that's a form of face, I guess.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'd love to jump in here and talk about this work, but the other works in the exhibition as well, because I'm wondering, when you received the prompt for displacements and we asked you to think about home and what is home, what is your true home, what is your current home, and displacement from your ancestral home of Korea, what were you thinking about when you selected work to include in the project? What elements were you looking for? What made Juwon be something you wanted to include in thinking about the ideas of home?
That's super hard question. Yeah, I think that idea of home is like all around in my work in general. But I guess I sort of select the 2D and 3D works and important works from the past and then also present, and then the works that can be a good playground for me to make more work in the future. So in that way, I sort of curated all the work together. But when I think about home, it's the most comforting and unstable place at the same time, because I can't really pinpoint one. And I guess I constantly feel like I feel like I'm in flux, but like, accept that that is my home. And all of my work has that kind of quality, unsettling, a little bit nervous or a little crazy. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, I lost my dad beginning of this pandemic, and he was my big home. Thinking about him, it's just really big figure for me, for my life, and my mom too. But it's more spiritual way. I don't think they'll be happy if I tell them like, I want to go back and live with you guys because you're my home. They want me to be doing my thing, and this is my home where I build my family, which is in America, in Atlanta, and this is my home. And so sometimes it's confusing when I say home, and my husband always kind of point out, which home? Your home is us, right? So I have to adopt that. I have to remind myself sometimes, like, I can't really think of home as my mom and my dad and my part of my family in Korea. I mean, they're home too, but my home is my husband and my kid and my life in America.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry to hear of the loss of your father. But thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your ideas of home. And I wonder to Lilly, you and Lilly have worked together before. Lilly interviewed you for your catalog for the exhibition that you had at the Halsey in 2015. But I'm wondering, Jiha, did you see anything new in your work after reading Lilly's most recent response to it for this project?
Well, Lilly and I talked before she wrote an essay, and whenever we talk on the phone, now I sound like I talk to her all the time, which is not. But when I talk to Lilly, I can't even look at my watch and how long we've been talking, and we just hit it off, and so many interesting conversation. And one thing I really appreciate how Lilly wrote about this essay, instead of pinpointing like each work or like sort of trying to explain, just she kind of touched base a bigger, idea, and then our current important things in this country, which I really, really appreciate. And that's exactly dialogue I want people to have when they look at my work. I don't want them to talk about, oh my God, that's all well painted, well made. I don't want any of that. I want my work to be the point of departure for important conversation. And I think that Lilly really touched that. So thank you, Lilly.
Well, thank you, Jiha. And thank you for the work. And thank you for your, it was informative, interesting, illuminating.
Absolutely. And Lilly, I just say when we received your response for Jiha's work, I was really struck by how you approached it through this, the lens of race for this project. And you were able to touch on so many elements of Jiha's work, but make it feel especially relevant for this moment that we're living in the summer of 2020. And so this kind of the same question for you. You've written about her work before. You and Jiha have a professional and personal relationship, a friendship. So when you sat down to approach this project, being familiar with her work already, what was going through your mind, or did you settle on this lens early on, or were there other angles that you considered from which to approach her work that perhaps you wish I had given you more word counts to be able to explore?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I just think because we are at this very particular moment in our time. I mean, it's extraordinary, right? We have the pandemic. We have so many other major issues, and certainly, racism, and especially, the systemic injustice against Black Americans and all of that, you know. So it was just like it made me start thinking more about what, you know, being Asian or Chinese in America is, and by extension, you know, Jiha. I don't know that I don't know, had thought that much about it, because, you know, we, in some ways, it's a different kind of confrontation, or a different kind of interaction. But of course, you know, there are things there we know. I mean, I know I'm different, but, you know, I came to this country when I was very young, unlike Jiha. So this is what I know. And when I came, the whole idea was to assimilate. I mean, it wasn't like you had to think about it. You wanted to be, I mean, I don't know if I would say I wanted to be American per se. I mean, I knew I was Chinese, and my parents were certainly proud of it, you know, but I grew up in a different society, and everyone was sort of, you know, trying to, what is the word is, assimilate, right? So, and of course, things change, and we begin now to understand, you know, or begin to think more about differences as well as similarities, and how these different communities can and should coexist, and how much richer it is to have all of those differences. So, you know, I think it's a wholly different subject. So just to get back, so this is what I thought of almost immediately, as I said, in this context, in today's terms, you know, in today's events, you know, crushing as they are every day. You know? Can I say vote? Vote early, vote
Absolutely, you can.
I said vote early.
Oh yeah, please do.
Well, I think that's a perfect sentiment to end on, encouraging viewers to vote, and to encourage your friends and family to vote as well. But thank you so much, Jiha and Lilly. I know personally I could sit here for another hour and listen to you talk and discuss the ideas in Jiha's work, and indeed the moments, the moment that we're in, and the issues that impact all of our lives. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
And thank you also for our viewers for your comments. Some people were delighted about Kimchi, Jiha. So thank you for following along. But tonight's talk is one in a series of many conversations that will take place over the remainder of 2020. Tune in 2 weeks' time for a conversation between Ricarda de Ecker and the Halsey Institute's own Brian Granger on Thursday, September 24th at 11 a.m. here on Facebook Live. And in the meantime, you can visit displacements.org to experience the exhibition and put those upcoming events on your calendar, as well as to read Lily Wei's response to the work of Jiha Moon. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Lily.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.